First of all, I guess we're technically rolling now. How exciting. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me. This is
Thank
the
you.
first episode back to Into the Backing. And this show is fun. Sometimes not so fun, but in this case, with episode one, we're going to definitely make it fun, which is why we're starting with such a silly, I think, debate, not debate as such, but conversation. I feel like this is something that we can all bring some insight to the table. Next episode, because I'll be dropping an episode on the 15th of every month. Next episode is a lot more serious. So, with that being said, what are we talking about? We're going to be talking about check nymphing, Euro nymphing. Why does it cause so much drama on the internet? Is it really fly fishing? All those sorts of fun things. Obviously, our panel today, for those of you just tuning in, is Kelly Galloup, renowned a streamer guy who has also written a book on dry flies, but we don't talk about that. Kelly, you've been put into a corner of a box, as you know. George Daniel is the George, I feel like you do everything as well, but you've also been put in a bit of a box in a corner when it comes to nymphing. And I know you've just written a really interesting piece on it. And then Nick, you mind yourself really here in the Southern Hemisphere, and you are a bamboo rod builder. And some may call you a dry fly purist. Have you also been put in a box?
Probably I'd get that label, but I wouldn't quite call myself a purist, but I'm doing my best.
Okay, cool. Anyone have questions before we dive in?
How much we getting paid? Oh,
Yeah,
just kidding.
you would. What's your daily fee again? Like 4 grand US a day? Not just kidding.
Cool. I
Um,
want New Zealand dollars.
Uh, that's
um,
right. I'll
George,
just take it out at rent at your place and take it up there.
go. Yeah, we'll be seeing you in a bit. We'll be seeing you in a month, 2 months.
Yep, month and a half.
George, what is the
Yes.
difference between Euro nymphing, Czech nymphing, Polish nymphing, French nymphing? Nymphing.
Yeah, everyone's got their own interpretation, but I mean, it's really the same damn thing. I think when we started this, essentially it's tightline nymphing, which basically originated, I think, in Europe, with Frank Sawyer and skews and all that, and the U.S. developed it, and guys like George Harvey, Joe Humphreys, they were doing this stuff back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And with competition fishing, with the U.S. becoming a little bit more involved with competitive fly fishing, they started learning from a little bit more from the Czechs and some of these European anglers. But really, what it comes down to is, based on my experience, when people talk about earlier, when they talked about French nymphing, Czech nymphing, Polish nymphing, it's basically the geography. And I think one of the things about your systems is kind of based on where you fish. I mean, basically it's the same techniques. You're fishing weighted flies, you're casting, it's line control, but your rigs, the leader length, and basically the whole system is kind of modified just based on your unique physical geography. And when you go to the Czech Republic and France, I mean, those are two completely different sets of systems. Where in France, you have really typically like really shallow water, skinny water. You're fishing lighter flies, longer leaders. Where in places like in the Czech and other places, you're fishing often heavier flies, shorter leaders. So I think a lot of it's the same damn thing. But people just want to compartmentalize it. So I kind of lump it all under tightline nymphing, Euro nymphing, contact, whatever the hell you want to call it. It's really the same thing. It's just how you build it based on where you're fishing.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's a good way to describe it. Why? Well, I guess let's start with the article you recently wrote. Can you tell us the premise of the article before we go all in here?
Yeah, I mean, you tell me I get pigeonholed, which I do, but it's amazing the amount of fan mail I get from purists, because I talk about modern or just kind of like systems that we're currently using these days. So I get a bunch of like hate mail on a regular basis saying how I'm destroying fly fishing, and the pioneers would be rolling in their graves based on what I'm doing. So it's just so I wrote an article called "The Devil Fishes Mono," and it's basically just the idea that it's just a system that works, and monofilament, whether you like it or not, it is kind of part of the current fly fishing world right now. And there's some advantages and there's lots of disadvantages, but I just kind of talked about the advantages and why it's used, and especially in competitive fly fishing. And in competitive fly fishing, you're not going after monster fish, larger fish. Typically, you're just going after numbers. So if your goal is to simply just catch lots of fish and be pretty much mindless about it, it is usually the more effective tool. And that was kind of what the whole idea about the article was.
Yeah. Kelly, did you read it? Nick, did you read it?
No,
No, I haven't
I
seen it
haven't,
yet.
I'm afraid, but I'll look it up.
Been fishing season. Everyone's been too busy.
I could add to something about that when modern streamers came out, I got the same hate mail that George did. There were shops that would not handle streamers. It told me I was nothing more than a bass fisherman. I said, great, I like that too.
Compliment.
Shit, having fun, but same thing. And I would add to that, I was thinking about this on the way home, growing up like George did with the whole selective trout strategies here in the US. There were a lot of shops that wouldn't sell nymph. Matter of fact, where selective trout strategy started with Swisher and Richards, which I think was probably the most instrumental book in our history to get things changing. And the shop that was done at was Gates El Sabo Lodge, and they would not sell a nymph. So there's been a lot of these transitions, and something pisses everyone off along the way, without exception. So,
is it like that down here, Nick? Or is that primarily up? I actually feel like it's more snobbish down here in the Southern Hemisphere than it is up there.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I guess you've got a few old clubs through Australia in particular, but even some of those old boys have made the change, to all these different methods. So yeah, I probably have a pretty small group of angling friends. So I'm a little bit off the radar in my own sort of corner, as you might say. So, but definitely that debate is everywhere. Is it fly fishing? Is it fly casting? All that sort of thing. You still hear that. Some guys from New Zealand popped by this morning and were saying the same thing, about it here. So
sure. What were they saying? Maybe we could provide some idea of what the word on the street is.
Yeah, well, I mean, these guys this morning are saying, hey, how can it be fly fishing? They're not casting a fly line, and it's just so repetitive, and they're pounding the water, and, there's skill in it. It takes a lot of, concentration, but they sort of were saying, well, how is it even fly fishing when they're just sort of combing the water like that? But, I don't see it that way, but that seems to be we've got a pretty broad church, hey, sailfish, steelhead, saltwater, what's in a name for me? If you're having fun and it's legal, then, or you don't get caught, that's all good.
So there's no fly line in check nymphing though, or in what should we call it, George? Just moving forward, the check nymphing, should we call it just nymphing? Or
it's different systems in competitive fly fishing, your leader can exceed twice the length of the rod. I'm not going to get into all these details. So there's part of the fly line being used, but what a lot of anglers are doing now that are not following these international rules, they're simply just using 30, 40 feet of monofilament. So there is no fly line. So that's where a lot of the controversy becomes. But I remember even when Joe Humphreys, when he worked with Cortland Line Company developed the first deep nymphing line. Basically, it was the first competitive fly line. They did that back in the late 80s, early 1990s. And Joe took a pile of flack saying that's not fly line because it's not tapered and so forth. So just like Kelly was saying, no matter what you do, you're going to be pissing a lot of people off. It's just the way it is.
I remember when Joe did that before, I thought Bruce Richards did that also in the 027s, no 027s, no, I think they're 029s, can't remember because we were tight lining steelhead.
That's right. Yeah.
And that we were trying to make it, and these lines are we call them competition lines now, but we were throwing split shot. We were nymphing steelhead in deep water, right? And when I went back, I was thinking about that today also. I started steelheading in the 60s when I was a child, and it was a New York thing that I saw mostly in Michigan, where guys used the same rod and reel, and they used blue strand. And blue strand you could see, and they fished. Actually, it was they used household sponge, and they dipped it in anise oil. And they all used the same systems. And they were tight lining and just flossing a lot of those fish, but because they were steelhead, they're fishing them on beds. But I remember, I'm pretty sure it was in early 70s when Joe was tight lining with amnesia. Yeah, red amnesia, which we use that also in the Great Lakes tight line. But it was really, it's ironic. It's called amnesia. It's not supposed to have memory. It's the most coily shit that ever hit the freaking planet. And so we started, I think it was Walt Grau was the first guy I saw use yellow strand because it was softer. But the whole thing was just getting in contact and getting to the bottom. And we took the same amount of shit steelheading that we weren't steelheaders at all because we were nymphing steelhead and we were using mono and slinky rigs. But if you go back, I can't remember the year, but Joe Humphreys did his show right above this shot on the rock wall. Were you last year when you were up there? That was where Joe shot. George was here last year. I think it was last year. And you and your wife and walked the wall. And that's where Joe did the first, and he did it with using amnesia. And I didn't think he was going to make it out alive. I mean, people just, they just bastard him to death. And he was just simply tuck casting a weighted nymph with some split shot and keeping in contact with it and kick the shit out of him. And so, but boy, the public had no sympathy for Joe on that one. He was not fishing. And so it's been around a long time as far as taking the flack for it. And I doubt it's going anywhere.
So it does. Okay. Then what is fly fishing? Is fly fishing the line? Is it a fly? Is the cast? What is fly fishing?
Let's start with Nick. He said he's the purist.
Yeah, well, I mean,
not put my finger
I wouldn't say I've done a lot of research, but I did have a look at the Oxford Dictionary, circa 1400 definition, and it was fishing with a fly, whether as a lure, whether artificial or natural. So that would rule out all saltwater fishing where you're using a minnow pattern, or that'd rule out everything. But you could pull the wings off a butterfly and use that. So I mean, that's a pretty bizarre starting point, and I think we've thankfully moved well beyond that. So yeah, I think anyone really can define it for themselves. I mean, why would people care what someone thought of them? If they're out there having a good time, they want to call it fly fishing. Why isn't it fly fishing to me? I've got my methods that I like to fish, but I'm not going to impose them on anyone else,
Yeah. And as a disclaimer, I will say I had a member post this in our members chat, and the consensus is nobody cares. But that's my community. I obviously, it sounds like, George, there's a far broader community of much more anal people out there. What's your opinion, George, or what's your definition of fly fishing?
To be honest with you, anymore, I don't even say I'm a fly fisher. I'm a fisher, and that's kind of the way I identify. So typically, as long as I'm fishing artificial flies, I'm releasing fish. I really don't give a damn what you're doing, and that's kind of how I identify myself now. I think too much. Everything's so polarized. You want to divide yourself. You're a dry fly. You're an nymph. I'm just a fisher. So basically, artificials, catch and release, and as long as you're doing it without harm to the fish, I really don't care how you do it. I think it's as technology. I mean, Kelly will tell you. I mean, Kelly was part of this forefront with just all this new technology with development and like fly tying materials. But I think the more technology is involved in development and engineering is involved with fly fishing, I think there's going to be a thinner line between traditional fly fishing and spin fishing. You're seeing a lot of the two things converge, which I think is a good thing when you're trying to improve the sport, to help people catch fish and enjoy their time on the water a little more. And it just keeps it, to me, a hell of a lot more enjoyable.
Kelly, what's your definition of it?
I think historically, I would say your line outweighs your lure. And so the line propels your fly, right? And so, but then spake shows up and there's a lot of things that come in there. But I kind of agree with George. In the old days, we were always trying to get people into fly fishing because it was such a pissant little community and there's no money. And suddenly it blows up. And now everybody's got an opinion about everything. And having been on every side of that coin, I understand it quite well. But, for me, it was always the line carries the lure as opposed to the lure carrying the line. That was, as a child, I remember that was the definitions you would hear, spin versus fly and stuff like that. But I also go back to the time where I know that 70% of my steelhead fishing and salmon fishing was done with a line being carried by the weight of the split shot, not by the flies. And so it would be kind of hard, other than I really like to pick on Georgian people that do this stuff just because it's fun. And that was my whole thing, was that this, when I started getting shit about it, I had something online about those flies have no soul. And I still believe that. They're too goddamn shiny. But the fish eat the living shit out of it, better than anything that's ever been invented.
Wait,
I do it too.
You, man of streamers, saying there's no soul and it's too shiny. What?
Oh my God, it's nothing there. I got complete orgies in some of my flies. So, yeah, so no, I mean, I totally agree with George and Nick. It's like, who gives a shit while you fish? I take a lot of shit for throwing gear. I love gear fishing. I don't never denied that. Man, I've said it 100 times. If I would, as a child, could have developed lures the way you can now, I probably would have done that, as opposed to, I just liked the building premise or idea that just building the fly. But if I could have built lures, I probably would have done that too. I don't know, but it's like they said, it's just something pisses everybody off nowadays. I mean, and so I like to stir that pot.
Yeah, you do. And that's where I'm going next. So a guy walks into the shop.
Yeah.
It sounds like a bad joke, but I'm dead serious. So a nympher walks into the slide in. What happened? And Kelly Gallup's in the shop. What happens next?
We take them right over and show them the 100,000 nymphs that we have over there. And mind you, and I do this a lot. If you go back in time, I'll probably get a lot of shit for this, but I think I invented the cider. If you go back before there were ciders, I had videos 20 years ago about putting 3 tones of mono, trying to do it. One of my seminars, I talked about naked nymphing, and it's how I took people through indicators, mono, and then just straight up going through by feel, right? I've always done it. I love it. I mean, that's how I started my life steelhead fishing, was that. And so I've always loved it. I remember when the beadhead came out, that took a lot of shit. That thing didn't do anything. I mean, it barely sunk a fly. And so when somebody walks in, the first thing we do is ask them how they fish, you know? And if it's a Euro nympher, they know they come in guns loaded because they want to start messing with me, right? Oh yeah, come on. So I can fuck you fish, you know that. And they all know it. The people that know me know that we just go right over. And we'll also tell you, we had Czech nymphs of all. I guided Vladdy 25 years ago, the Polish champ, the Czech champion, actually twice. And up here, he used to come up here. And we had a blast. I mean, they had the Vladdy worm and stuff like that. But we had jig style nymphs in 12 years ago. So it's not like, I don't care how you get your jollies. I'll sell you anything you want. and frankly, I do it a lot. I mean, I fish a lot of those flies. There is no denying those soulless flies catch fish unbelievably well. Like, I don't know about George, what you think, but I think it's pretty hard to say that they don't outfish most flies. And I don't care which fly. What makes me sad, one of the reasons I like to hit it on the head with no soul, is that I'm seeing because we sell so many, as you've seen how many flies we carry. And I'm watching traditional flies are going to be gone soon. Hare's ears, pheasant tails, you know, standard, just regular caddis larva. And that was one of the things that for me, and I know George grew up, I don't know how Nick grew up, but George grew up exactly the same way. You learned Latin, you learned to speak of every single insect, you learned their hatch progressions, you know, if they were a larva, or if they're a nymph, or how you did, and you had all the emergent systems, you know, everything in between. You learned how to get bugs where they're supposed to be. And then all of a sudden, these things come along and they're in two zones, and they eat the hell out of it. And it offends my soul fly tire sole because they work too damn well. But you can't deny that they work, boy. There's no denying it. And when somebody comes in and they're saying, well, I'm having trouble, I said, come here. And I show them, I give them a olive hotspot. I'm in 2 sizes. They go, there you go. You're going to catch fish all day. So there's no, I have no prejudice and don't care. And I completely think Nick hit it on the head is, who should care what you fish or how you fish it? Like you said, and even if it's illegal. I mean,
just don't get caught. Just don't get caught.
Exactly.
I'm taking my headphones out for this part of the conversation. No, I think that, and that's really cool to hear that straight from you.
No, and I agree. And I agree 100% with Kelly. I mean, you should have seen when Kelly, when he posted that, I think it was on Instagram or whatever it was, like my inbox just started flooding, like, see what this guy's doing, like, see what he's saying about, and like, there's truth. And to be honest with you, following up on Kelly's point, this is why I don't teach Euro nymphing, and I don't tie Euro nymphs in my Penn State fly fishing classes. One is I want them to actually learn how to cast a fly rod. So later on, we do an advanced class. I may touch a little bit on Euro nymphing, but if these kids are traveling, if they're going to freshwater, saltwater, like they're not too many trout. So they're often going to be going after bass. They're going to be after all their saltwater species. They're going to need to know how to cast a damn fly rod. So casting is priority, and same thing with the fly tying. Like I don't do perdigons in my class, even though, because it would get boring and you're just wrapping thread or tinsel around a hook, and that's pretty much it. There's no skill involved. So I want these kids to understand how to work with dubbings. I want them to understand proportions. I want them to learn hackling techniques. So there's a lot of reasons why I don't, even though I do use them, just like Kelly, they're incredibly effective. I don't teach those skills in my class because I want them to develop into better fly fishers. And I think that's one of the problems with this, with Euro nymphing in particular, especially with Nick. I mean, where Nick is, and I know where Kelly's at, like you have to be a damn good fly caster. And the problem I'm seeing with some of these kids on like the youth team and even some of the adult teams, when you look at guys like Lance Egan, Devin Olson, like these guys are great. They can do anything, but you'd be surprised. Some of the anglers on these teams, like on the bottom tier, they can chuck weight. But if you have a fish rising 40, 50 feet away and you need to make a reach men cast, they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to throw a line. They can chuck weight, but they have no idea how to actually aerialize line and place line in the manner to give you a good presentation. So I think that's one of the problems with this technique. And that's why I try not to push it too much, because people get into it too deep and then they just get stuck there and they don't become a well-rounded angler.
Yeah, I think
Nick, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I think the techniques are so different, that what's in a name, who cares? But the genres are so different that there's almost no overlap, in that sort of traditional fly casting, fly fishing, and the tight line nymphing. I spent a month 5 years ago in central Pennsylvania on Penns Creek, and with my rod making mentor Jeff Wagner, and all the guides out of the fly shop there, they all guided tight line nymphing because they were mainly occasional anglers. They needed to catch fish, and that's really important. You don't want someone on the water not catching fish. So they were catching quite a few fish, but Jeff and I would just sit there on the bank. We'd talk shit and look in the corners, and after half an hour, we'd see a little sip in a log jam, and we'd wander over and change flies and whatnot. But the head of the fly shop said, "That's not fly fishing. That's sitting on the bank waiting to die." I said, we're fishing. We're not casting, but we're fishing. So yeah, I think there's certainly room for both, but catching fish is important, but I think there's room for people to learn that fly casting sort of traditional method too.
What I was going to hit on was that the kind of what Nick just said and what George said was that, once you get in it, there, and I heard this multiple times, not a lot, maybe a half dozen times this year. You get into it and you catch fish, and that's really supposed to be the thing, right? Learn how to catch it, but you are kind of pigeonholed on a wedge, and you're not really casting and stuff like that. And I had multiple people tell me that were who came in to rattle my cage, by the way, to tell me what, they're full on soulless Euro nymphers. And And they love to get me going, like think I'm going to get like, oh, I hate it or something. I go, that's great, whatever. How'd you do today? Which kills the whole freaking thing, right? It's like, you care how I did? Yeah, I don't give a shit how you catch them. But they said to me, of the 6 people, they said that they started out Euro nymphing exclusively, never had done anything else, but were now bored with it. And they wanted to learn to aerialize a line and fish dry flies. So just like with streamers, when people, I mean, there are so many young guys who did nothing but streamer fish, and they get bored with that too. I mean, I'd rather fish a dry fly than anything on earth. I'm going with you not with you, but to see you in BC. And I just talked to Jerry. Shit, we're only bringing about 80% dry flies for steelhead, and we're going to get our ass kicked. Don't care, right? It's what you like to do. And so that's what I'm seeing now is people are actually saying, yeah, that was fun. It's one more. I've preached that for 30, 40 years. Have as many arrows in your quiver as you can. If you only are an upstream dry fly fishing, what are you going to do? That's your game. If you can only huck a giant streamer and rip it back, where's your game? You've got one little thing. And I'm seeing guys and girls say to me, I'm moving away. I want to learn this now. So they might start like the people that did in Colorado, wherever you were, and say they just catch a lot of fish. And then they wonder, what's that thing going back and forth in the sky with somebody fishing? They go, I want to try that, And so some people say it's ruining this business. I don't think so. I think they're just putting more people out there. They'll figure out a way everybody figures out how they want to have fun. And so it's probably in the long run, much like streamer fishing will be good for the entire sport because nobody's going to just stick. And if they do, who gives a shit? Who cares if they just stick in Europe?
Yeah. Out of curiosity, what was this post that you posted? I've missed it.
Me?
Yeah.
Who?
You on Instagram.
I did some stupid. It was a clickbait thing. Euro isn't fly. I don't know. I can't remember. It was Braden did it, and I throw him in he did it, and it was going to go on and just say, "Is it really fishing?" And and it did what it was supposed to. It got lots of people engaged and more, bombed George and not me so much. But it got people. It wasn't like the one where my flies created sexual violence. It wasn't like that. It was just something. It was a catchy little thing, and the idea is we go on and I probably said it 5 different times in the thing. I do it. I said it 5 times, I think. I said, and my basic premise was, who gives a shit? Who cares what you do? I mean, when I grew up, what Nick was saying about sitting on the bank, if you grew up during that 70s era of fly fishing, you fished. It was somewhat Euro in the upstream, waiting for a proper fish and, biting that fish to rise 3-4 times. You sat waiting and watching. It was boring as shit. And it turned a lot of people off from fly fishing, if you ask me. I had lots of people I was guiding saying, how long are we going to sit here? So let's let that fish get in a rhythm. And that's a hard case to sell. So, but I don't know. It was a short little, it was like a 10-minute thing on Instagram, I think. I don't really watch them very often. And I surely don't look at the comments too often because you get too many haters in there just beating the shit out of you. So
I have no doubt it would have been entertaining. Let's pick through some of this stuff. I think it's important to hear what the public is saying. So George, what are maybe the 3 most common arguments that you hear as to why it's not fly fishing?
Well, just going back on traditional routes, I mean, you have the weight of the fly propelling the line forward, which by definition is more spin fishing than fly fishing. There's definitely that. There's a fact, the fly designs, like Kelly was saying, there's no simplicity. I mean, it's too simplistic. There's no movement in the flies. It goes away completely from the traditional way of looking at things. And really, they just said, like, there's no fly casting. I mean, they said basically if there's no fly casting, art of fly casting, it can't be, in theory, fly fishing. So those are kind of what I hear on a regular basis. And it's just repetitive, and it's just basically just variations of that same thing, just beating it into my email box on a daily basis. That's all.
I wonder if these same people are using horsehair fly lines. Like, where do they draw the line?
Yeah.
Bring it on.
I think for me,
That's-
and I've never actually expressed this out loud, so I have no idea how this is going to come across. But I think for me, a lot of it, if I personally, like you guys, don't care what people are fishing, as long as you're out and having fun and you're not hurting anybody as such. But a lot of it comes to perception. Like if I had to really dig deep as to what would bug me about it, it would be my perception of the person's motive. So if I had to liken it to something in kind of my steelhead world, it would be somebody fishing an egg pattern. Where, at what point, so many of us, we start fly fishing or we start fishing, forget fly fishing. We start fishing and we want to catch the most fish. Then we want to catch the biggest fish. And then the progression is typically that from there on, then on, you want to catch the hardest to catch fish, and then the hardest to catch fish with the hardest, method, if you will. And so I've always been a little bit irked when I see somebody trying to kind of catch the biggest and the most, and they're very experienced. They've been doing it a long time. I don't understand why you need to go so dirty to catch so many fish. If it's not a competition, I guess I start to question your motive. And in today's era, I start questioning, is it for your ego? Is it for your friends? Is it for social media? What is it for? And I don't like when I start questioning somebody's motive. I try not to. I try to turn a blind eye to it where I can. But on fish, especially big fish or fish that we're not meant to catch so many of them that often, I could get annoyed. Not again I don't have trout as close to my heart as maybe some of you guys do. So it doesn't bug me to see it on a trout stream. But if I did see a Euro nympher come to the Bulkley and catch fish after fish that way, I would start to be very annoyed. Yeah.
That happened with you guys with egg patterns.
Yeah.
I remember back in the 80s when they started throwing egg patterns in BC, I thought they were going to hang people.
Yeah. At some point, I just look at them and you question their motive. It's like, is something wrong with you? Are you okay?
Just,
and I don't mean to be that person, but there is this part of me that questions if there's something off with that human. And personally, it makes me just steer clear a bit.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the term competition, when you're describing what irked you, so there's the competition from competition fly fishing, which is something I can't get my head around personally. The people that do it, good for them. But to me, it's a competition between me and a fish at any one time, and treating them as a commodity and a number to beat other people is not for me. And then that also spills over, I think, into social media and Facebook, and I caught this many, and I don't tell anyone how many fish I've caught. Enough is the answer. Maybe I don't catch enough, but yeah, I think that competitive thing is part of the world we live in.
Yeah, and it could be guilty by association. We could see this, nymphing as being attached to competitive fishing, which automatically causes people to have their hackles up.
By the way, April, I just thought about the article. I was trying to remember because I said that I didn't think it was truly competition unless you did every single discipline per day. I said, and somebody asked my opinion. And I said, well, I think you should have to fish dry a style every day or something like that. And then it came in with all the competition guys saying, you don't know shit about this. We do. I said, well, then take away the Euro aspect and see how it goes. And that's what, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's what, there was something to do with that. And it was supposed to make it even more fun, which it did, but that was what it was. I just remembered it. I'm sorry, but you kind of hit on it right there.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick. Sorry. No, that's a good one, Kelly. I like it. It's all kind of starting to piece together.
Yeah. So I guess that competitive element, the one criticism I've heard about it is it is too effective and the fish have no respite, so boats are anchoring up, drifting, say where we were in Montana on the Madison, and just boat by boat pounding the honey holes, and those fish just, they don't get to come up for a fly, let alone come up for air. So is that a valid criticism? Depends on the water, depends on the competition, I guess. But that's by the same token, we're in Yellowstone Park, and a guy stood in the water for an hour and a half, didn't move, just cast and cast and cast and cast. Didn't see him catch a fish. He left. A few bugs started coming off and fish started rising. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a problem or not. Kelly would see a lot more in his backyard of this sort of thing. He might want to comment.
I don't see it so much on the Madison. On the Bighorn, it's where I first saw what they called the daisy chain, and they would literally just go in a circle. 5, 6 boats would go up and set a hole and run through the hole and just start going around in circles like that. I saw that a lot, and I agree that here it's so fast it's hard to set up on a run, and so they go. But you see that a lot, and the whole competition end of it. And again, if you go back in time, I know I've got videos where I'm talking positive about competition, because I think no matter what, and I said something in that stupid little Instagram thing I did, that we all just find ways to cheat. And all it is, when the French had the shallow water and the longer leaders, and then, you go to check someplace and it's short and fast and doesn't work as well. And everything's about learning to catch because you're in a competition. But what I do know, no matter what, when you have competition, everybody gets better. Even if you don't do that system, you might figure a system. And that's what I was kind of trying to get at. What if we had one day where you had to fish only dry flies? And the next day you had to swing wet flies or fish wet flies traditionally upstream. And then one day you could do a streamer, one day you do a lake and all that, but you had to fish specifically, right? You would still have that same thing. The best, the Lance Egans and the George Daniels of the world would peak at the top, and you would learn from them. But we're all afraid, because probably what you said, April, this whole social media bullshit, that's what really pisses people off, is they got to sit there. In my show, in the Fly Fish show we do, our biggest thing is that guy sucks. He never catches enough fish. My idea was I was going to do a teaching show. And, if you got a couple of things, great, right? But we've gone to this catch fish. And there's this, you suck if you don't catch fish. Okay, great. You are. But you got all these people posting up how many fish they catch because they're Euro fishing and they got 23. I have a rep, Kurt Kruger's my sage rep. And he found out that I do 2 days. I have all these rules for me how I fish. In July, dry fly only. 1 week is the whole month of July is pre-1960 flies. Can't think anything. Everything's that. 1 week is horsehair tippet, by the way, Nick, and which is a total pain in the ass. And so, but I mean, there's rules. And twice a year I go totally Euro nymph, nothing but all day. And then Kurt found out that I was going, and I fished for 1 hour and 47 minutes, doorstep to doorstep. And he says, "How many did you catch?" I go, "A lot." And he said, "How many?" I said, "A lot. Doesn't matter." And he said, "How many?" I said, 63. That was 63 fish from this big to whatever, sitting. And I didn't, same place you fished, George, right up the wall. I went up to the fast one, just fished every run and just as many as I could hoover out of that thing. And his comment was really striking. He said, "Are you tired of catching every fish yet?" And I said, "Yeah, that's why I only do it twice a year." But if I'm in trouble and I can't catch something, I got no problem throwing that on. You still want to get a tug. Everybody wants a tug, right? And so it's just kind of how I think it comes around from this damn social media aspect. I mean, I got a pretty damn thick skin. It's very hard you offend me. But I read somebody tells me I'm a piece of shit and I don't know how to fish because I only caught 1 fish in 20 minutes. You start saying, well, fuck you, right? Where's your fucking show? Come fish with me. I would love to have you show me how to do this. Oh, that guy loses a lot of fish. No shit. So I don't know. But I think you nailed it, April, when you said the social media thing? Without the social media thing, we wouldn't be sitting here.
Well, it's just a lot more genuine. I think everything boils down to authenticity at the end of the day with so many of these conversations that we have. And that comment that he made about, "Are you tired catching every one of the fish in the river yet?" is how I feel. It's, if you aren't tired, if you need to catch all the fish, there's a deeper rooted issue going on there. And and I think that for me, that's a big part of it.
I think they grow out of it. I do. I think you will grow out of it eventually. And because George just said it, he said the same thing. You know, he doesn't teach it. You're going to go into it, but you're going to grow up. You're going to want to do other things. And what you said about the first and the most, and Robert Trevor's the guy who wrote that way back when, about how people go through that transition, right? And you eventually come home and fish horsehair tippet for a week with a red fox only. So you will come home eventually.
Do you? So George, what about you though? I mean, you go out, you've been around for a long time. What inspires you to put on a nymphing rig when you get out there?
When there's really no other options. I mean, kind of like what Kelly was saying, going out, like when he's got like the month of July. When I go out west to visit my brother, I don't want to throw a nymph. I mean, I bring a couple of nymphs, but when I go out west, I mean, I like doing the gulpers. I mean, all I want to do is dry fly fish, maybe streamer fish. And if shit gets really bad and there's no other options, then the nymphing box comes out. But for me, I mean, people want to say I like to nymph fish all the time, but nymphing I may do 50-60% of the time because I want to catch fish, but it's my least favorite technique. I mean, I dry flies, streamers, and then nymphs. I mean, that's exactly the category if I had my choice, my options. So nymphing is by far my.
That's exactly mine too, George. I mean, I fish dry fly. Everybody thinks I don't fish dry flies. And I mean, you and I both grew up only fishing dry flies because that's what you did in that era. You fished dry flies.
And you're on the wrong podcast. Where it should be on the Upstream Dry Fly Only podcast.
That's right. My second book's about cripples and spinners, and people go, "What's that mean?" It's my dating life, you dumbass.
Kelly, there's only one of you, I swear. So, Nick, what do you think? Would you fish a nymph?
Yeah, look, primarily I'm a sight hunter. You know, that's my thing. And I do love the bugs, you know. In central Pennsylvania, I stood there looking at the green drakes and the blue-wing olives and the sulfurs with my arms out wide, you know, tears in my eyes. I didn't even have to cast a fly, but I love how that interacts with the fishing, you know, that whole cycle. So the beauty of dry fly fishing, but I'll absolutely fish. I got a few dry flies that sink by accident and catch fish, let's say. But no, if I see a fish and it's feeding and it's not going to come up for a dry fly, I'm more than happy to put an nymph on, you know. But primarily I'm a sight fisherman, and I like the, you know, I just like dry fly because of the whole visual element of it. But I've got no problem with a nymph, and the tiny bit of nymphing I've done over the years that is blind for whatever reason, if it's just to, you know, if nothing else is happening, I never use an indicator, and I just sort of do my version of tight line nymphing, I guess, just maintain enough contact to try and feel or sense the take. And that's a buzz too, but I do it once in a blue moon, you know.
Yeah. How much of this controversy is driven by things like your clickbait, Kelly, and your article, George? How much of this controversy is driven by us and companies trying to get people to pay attention and talk?
Go ahead, George.
I don't know. I'll defer to Kelly. I'll let Kelly lead off in this one because he is the master of the clickbait. I will say that.
Well, I don't know about the companies. I do it for fun. You know, I do it in my fly tying. I do it, and I'm much like Nick. To me, I grew up with the dry fly thing, and that knowing the emergence, knowing how they got there. And I know George is exactly the same. He wouldn't be teaching at Penn State if he wasn't one of the best in the world at this. And so I'm the same way. I don't know about the as far as like doing it for business. I don't do that, you know, to sell when there'd be nothing to sell. I'm actually shitting in my own lunchbox when I do it sometimes. But it's kind of a fun thing. It started out with that. And then the Euro guys, their skins get a little thin, so it's easy to poke at them. And so, and even when I tell them I do it, it still irritates them. But I don't know. I think it's a little bit kind of what's become of our lives, the whole clickbait and enjoying and usually when I do one of those, it comes back and it's 98% guys having fun. They do it too. They make fun of their buddies who only dry fly fish, the whole dry or die gang. And there's the only nymph. And it usually is just pretty good spirited when it rolls around the circle. And then there's 2% of the just total fucking jackwagons that you couldn't have a conversation with if you tried to. They just absolutely hate everything and everybody. And I mean, I have one guy in there that's answered every single thing I've done in 15 years. And he's the greatest and it's great. He's got a platform. It's lovely, but
everyone needs a hobby.
Yeah, exactly. Living in grandma's basement is just a wonderful thing. And so I don't know, but I'm not sure I've seen, and I'll leave this to you, Joe. I'm not sure I've seen anything that I've done, at least. I don't watch all aside that one that was that fly name thing that got pretty intense for a while there. April, you were the first one to respond to that ever in history. And when that went down, but I would say I have not seen any difference, even when we pick on it, and we don't get an uptick in business or anything like that. It's just basically fun. That's it. I know there's people out there hating on it, but they're on anything. I don't give a shit what it is. What I'm trying to say is that I don't see it hate any more than they do streamers or they do dry only people. They're just there to fucking hate. They just want to hate. And so it's what it is.
The small percent, and the 98% is the experience that I've had as well. We take the piss out of each other.
They come in and defend everyone too.
Yeah.
They come in and they all beat up the one asshole. And so it's more fun that way. Get to watch that happen.
I've talked to like some of the reps. I mean, I work with some manufacturers. I think one of the things that, like with European nymph, and I think what they see, April and Nick, is I think they kind of look at Euro Nymphing almost as a kind of as a gateway drug. So what I mean by that is basically like what Kelly was saying earlier is like, I think we have like an attention deficit disorder. I mean, we definitely do. I mean, so people just need that quick fix once in a while. And one of the easiest ways to get into a fish, doesn't matter what time of the year, where you're going, is with Euro nymphing. So one of the ideas is if you can get them equipped and get them catching fish, get them happy, eventually they're going to evolve and kind of go into these other aspects. But I really think the Euro nymphing is, from a manufacturing standpoint, is kind of thought of as like kind of that gateway drug where it's going to get them kind of hooked, and then maybe they're going to blossom and maybe kind of go beyond than just chucking lead and chucking heavy flies.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because that's actually where I was going to segue next. You know, when you do start with dries or streamers or up top, I remember this was all before I got into fly fishing, before Skagit lines and crazy sink tips and the ability to really turn over the heavy stuff. So we did fish more subsurface patterns, even for steelhead. And it was so exciting when we could finally be dirty that we just wanted to whore ourselves out after that. I feel like if you start the other way and you start already as a bit of a whore, and then you obviously just inevitably go classy from there, which is better for the fish, because in the long run, we are going to have, I would assume, fewer fish. Maybe it's better that they're just getting it over with now, getting it done. And then as we have fewer fish in the future, they can start to, you know, catch fewer fish with other methods. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Hopefully, yeah.
Knock on wood.
Perfect.
Yeah. I mean, how many of those, if you catch 50 fish, you know, tight line nymphing, how many of those fish are truly memorable compared to if you catch 3 or 4 fish and you've just had to change flies on it 3 or 4 times, you've seen it in the water and it's taken your best cast to sneak it out. I mean, that's the stuff that goes in my diary or in my memory banks, you know. So some people will come to that, some people won't, and that both are fine, I guess, but that's what drives me.
Yeah. Do you think there's any way to get dirtier from here? Or is this it? Have we hit the bottom? Pardon the pun. Are we there?
We could
Kelly,
tip
you
them
don't
with
count because
maggots.
you are the kinkiest mofo I've ever met. You could go dirtier.
You're the one that started with the
You could
horse
be living
stuff.
in mud and you're still going to be dirty.
I would like to expound on one thing that Nick just said. I haven't taken a picture of a fish. I think cell phones were a big portion of our problem. And I haven't taken a fish, I think, in 9 years, because exactly what Nick just said. When we started taking pictures of every fish, I had no memory of it. And like even pictures I'd come back and look at, I would have no memory because it was the picture. It was the picture. It wasn't what I just did. I didn't write it in a diary. I had the cell phone picture. And when I quit, I remember every really good eat, every really good skate that drew something, drew a rise or whatever. Whereas before I remembered nothing. And I think Nick really just nailed something right there about, do you remember any of them? Or is it just a great big fucking orgy? And you just said, yeah, a lot of that was going on, but you don't remember, pardon that, the big one. I mean, none of that, it's like, and so I started taking adipose pictures just for yucks. And I would tell Johnny, yeah, there's a 23. Bullshit. I say, yeah, whatever. Can't prove it. And so, but I truly have not taken a picture of a fish. I mean, I'm on film constantly, but it's like, who cares, right? But I think Nick really just nails. I think you both did when you said where you were going. You start dirty, and then George said it's a gateway drug, and we got to the dirty, and Nick said, but how many do you remember? I think something got nailed right there, really, really, with an explanation point at the end of it, because you're missing. But I don't think you can change that, because you did the same thing in the old days: the most fish, then the biggest fish, and then the memorable fish, right? So I think that one's probably a big piece of this puzzle.
Yeah. Am I missing anything here? I feel like we've been pretty concise, so we're probably close to wrapping it up, but I don't want to leave anything on the table and then read comments and go, shit, why didn't I say that? Or why did I forget to ask that? Is there are there any other aspects of this? Are we too close to it to see it from maybe a beginner stance?
I don't know. I think George hit that on the gateway thing, and so did Nick while the guys were down there catching fish after fish. The guide's job has always been and will always be to put a tug on that line. And you're going to do what you have to do. So, I mean, you have to do that. People do not, back in the day when you were dry only, especially growing up in Michigan, where I was, you didn't have great hatches all the time. Matter of fact, they're very sparse usually for our day hatches. So you would wet fly and you would do other things to get a tug. So I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but it's there. It is. I think George hit it with the gateway thing. That's what it's going to be, and the people that stick are going to stick with it. It happens to everything. I keep thinking about when you were asking about that. This is no different. Like we were talking about bow hunting. You and I were last, and somebody asked me the other day about this, and I said, well, a compound bow is a lot better than a longbow, right? But if you say that to a longbow person, they'll stick your crossbow up your ass. They're pretty serious about their bows. And Nick's a bamboo guy, right? And I mean, there's that side of it, right? And then there's the glass side of it, and the graphite, blah, blah, blah. It's going to go on forever. Not sure we aren't going to answer this question.
No, I think so much of it is pride too. Just on that note, there's this level of pride. And so as fly fishers, we are proud, especially when we've worked so hard to be able to get that fly to be delivered to the fish in that maybe it's a long cast or a tricky presentation. And then I've seen it firsthand. There will be friends of mine who are so proud of the fact that they're able to catch a fish on a fly, on a fly line, I should say. And then they're offended or insulted that somebody was able to catch a fish of the same caliber in an easier fashion. And I feel like it chips away I feel like there's a perception as though it chips away a bit of their pride. I don't want to say ego because I don't know if it's always ego, but there is a little bit of just how come you get the same reward and the same satisfaction with half the skill as I did when I worked so hard, and I'm so proud to have put so much work into being able to deliver that fly to that fish. So there's a bit of pride there too.
I think that's ego.
Is that what it is? Do you know anything about that? No.
I think that's ego.
Okay, well, we'll probably wrap it up. Is there anything that you guys wanted to add or to throw in?
No, it was a pleasure being able to speak to Nick, Kelly, and you, April, all at the same time. This is great.
Yeah.
Fun.
Thanks for the
Yeah.
invite. Yeah.
Thank you for opening up fun with me too. I do know that there will be people waiting for more serious topics to be discussed, and I think that's what the show is going to be. We'll go fun, heavy, fun, heavy, fun, heavy, so that it doesn't get too honestly too exhausting for me, because that would suck. Could you imagine doing one of these a month on doomsday events? It would just slowly kill me. So
I was just about to say, you know, the one thing I might add,
Yeah.
Euro nymphing won't end fly fishing. You know, it's not doomsday.
it is not doomsday.
We'll all be just fine.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, I will wrap it up. It is so good to see all of you guys. Thank you
Great
for
to see
this.
you guys.
Thank you.
All right. See you,
Talk to you
bye.
soon. Bye.